little bit about why we organized this panel. We organized this panel to highlight the ways in which the faculty in our ethnic studies department at UH treats critical analyses of gender and sexuality as integral to the work that we do in the classroom, in our community organizing, as well as in our scholarship. Our department did something quite extraordinary, maybe about 12 or 13 years ago. Almost every hire has been a person who does gender and sexuality, who has been inspired by feminist scholarship, especially indigenous scholarship, feminists of color, as well as post-colonial feminists. So my colleagues, Taitano, Rod Labrador, Lisa Uperesa, as well as Brian Chung, they're all feminists. They all do feminist scholarship. And I think that the founders of the department were very forward-thinking and future-looking in hiring us and supporting us in our work, in really helping us articulate the importance of gender and sexuality in the kinds of research that we do. So why is gender and sexuality so important to our work? It is because even if we work in different fields, on different communities, we understand that any kind of decolonial project, any kind of liberatory project, will need to put what Jackie Alexander, a Caribbean feminist, has called erotic autonomy, as well as the control over our bodies and various gender expressions at the center of our work. And I think that Cindy Domingo sort of underlined this basic fact in her talk about the kinds of organizing, working class organizing efforts that she outlined in Seattle that have happened over the 40 years, by saying that that kind of organizing work was very much informed by being attentive to gender politics. So in other words, we can't build strong movements without also having good gender and sexual politics. It's really fundamental to our work. So I was thinking about the ways in which, what does it mean to do oceanic studies from this kind of perspective, where we are very much, situate gender and sexuality at the center of our work. And I think that for the presenters on this panel, who I will introduce in a moment, attending to Oceania is a space that is animated by multiple systems of knowledge that tells us about a range of embodied practices in which sexuality and eroticism, as well as a range of gender expressions, familial ties and affinities, are not compartmentalized but infused in our psychic, imaginative, economic, spiritual, and political realms. So with that, I will introduce our speakers, and the format will be very conversational. So I'll pose a few questions, and they will respond to that. And also, I'm hoping to talk to each other and talk to you about what inspires their work. Taitano would have been on this panel had he not been taking care of a million details that he has needed to attend to orchestrate this project. But I do want to say that his work has been absolutely key and fundamental to the ways in which we have to attend to the politics of gender in thinking about decolonization. So he has, his work, I think, is a basic text now for anybody who's looking at the relationship between gender and nation. And I really have been very, very much inspired by the work that Tai has done, both as an ethnographer as an indigenous theorist. So Tai, we miss you on this panel, but I'm sure you'll participate in the conversation. So with that, I will introduce Christine Tina Taitano Diarra. She is an assistant professor of American Indian Studies and Gender and Women's Studies at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Her research and teaching interests include Pacific history with a focus on Guam and Micronesia and Native women's histories. She's currently finishing a book project that is entitled Agent Lives, Lady Wives, Gender, Tomorrow Mobilities, and Colonial Modalities in Guam. And this examines the historical and cultural relations between Chamorro women and American Navy wives in Guam since the early 20th century. She'll talk more about that project. Tina has published several articles and essays, and of interest for today's panel is her essay in a special issue in Pacific Studies called Women Like Oceania, and she has a forthcoming essay in Intersections, Gender and Sexuality in Asia and the Pacific. We will be talking about her work also as a public historian, curator, and a documentary filmmaker. Ualoha omanawanui is a Kanaka Maoli artist, poet, and literary critic who is associate professor in the English department at the University of Technology. Her book, Voices of Fire, reweaving the literary way of Pele and Ika literature was published last year by the University of Minnesota last year by the University of Minnesota. She's the founding and chief editor of OEB, or Native Hawaiian Journal. She's prolific, and her publications reflect the ways in which she has developed a Wahine-centered framework to understand place-based literatures, various forms of literacy, including digital literacy, as well as various forms of learning and knowledge production. They really exemplify, if you look at her publications, they really exemplify her commitment to malama aina and her attention to the connections among land, divine powers, and humans. In all aspects of her work, Ualoha fuses artistry and politics wonderfully and seamlessly. It's really enviable what she does. My colleague, Lisa Uperesa, is assistant professor in ethnic studies and sociology at the University of Hawaii at Manua. She's a Pacific anthropologist, and her current research examines Samoan migration and mobility with a focus on American football. This is the topic of her book manuscript, which is it still titled People Teachers? And Gridiron Dreams. Lisa is the co-editor of a wonderful and just completed special issue of the Contemporary Pacific on global sports in the Pacific. It was published in November last year, and she's also authored several book chapters and journal articles on the ways in which sports as a capitalist enterprise intersects with Pacific masculinities and migration. So with that, I will pose my first question to them, and I will ask them to tell us a little bit about their books and current projects in order to underline for us their interests as feminist scholars working in Oceania, and how these interests animate their intellectual, political, as well as creative projects. So we start with Tina.
I actually prepared, well,
first of all, let me just say Dongle and Sidus to Department of Ethnic Studies. I also wanted to thank the other interns for making it possible for me to be here. And I wanted to say thank you for the questions. What I did was prepared a, looking specifically at the work, and I hope in my presentation that the questions that we're going to be posing today, it'll become self-evident, but otherwise I'll stop to kind of address some of those specific questions. But the way in which I presented my presentation today was to actually highlight the way that feminist theory has informed my work, and also to try to show what is specifically indigenous, and how indigeneity, feminist indigeneity, that is, can actually inform the broader feminist theory. So I hope that I can actually address those questions through this.
So will you just do your presentation all at once?
Yeah, okay. If that's okay.
Okay.
Aloha wena la kākou. Aloha mahalo nui nā akua o ke aina, a me nā pupua o ke ia pai aina o ke ia wawa o Manoa a I nā luna, a me nā alakai, a me nā mea ho'ohui o ke ia aha. Aloha kākou. As Monisha mentioned, my name is Ku'aloha Ho'omanawinui. I was born in Kailua, in Ko'olapoko, on this island, on the leeward side, and I was raised in my little homesteads in Puna, on the east side of the island of Kauai. My genealogies extend back on my father's side to Kailua, Kalihi, and Waianae on the island of Oahu, to Ka'u, Puna, and Kohala on the island of Hawaii, as well as to Korapora in Tahiti, Germany, Spain, and China. And on my mother's side, back to California, France, Germany, and England. My background is in Hawaiian Studies with my BA, Polynesian Religion with my MA, and Cultural Studies with my PhD. And I have studied with mentors and advisors such as Dr. Honani K. Trask, Dr. Nicola Kamei-Lehiva, Dr. Vivian McGregor, who I saw earlier here today, in my department with Dr. Christina Bakilega, Laura Lyons, and other really important feminists who do work not just in the Pacific, but with story, particularly through fairy tales as well as traditional literature and nationalism in different contexts and countries around the world. Other really important women that have formed the foundation of my studies include my tutu, Sarah Poniala Kakelaka-Meyer, and other women in my family and community, and many others over the years of my life. Men who have been very important in my scholarship as well in these areas have included Dr. John Charlot, who was my mentor in my master's, Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell, George Helm, who was a friend of my father when I was young, some of my colleagues now in the English department, Dr. Paul Lyons, who's here as well, and my grandfather, Benjamin Kainoa Lenny Meyer, my uncles, and many other men in my community and in my family. And I share with you my personal and academic mo'okuoha or genealogies because they're not only essential in shaping me as a person and as a scholar, but they're also very important in shaping my fields of study, my larger framework for my work, but also more specifically within this idea of mana wahine or female empowerment within the Pacific. So all of it comes together not just in who I am, but in the work that I do, and through the work that I do extends out to the different students and community people that I work with, that we all work together in this area to help to sustain and build all of our communities. So like Tina, I did sort of a more holistic presentation that I'll talk about a little bit more parts of it a little later. Mahalo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us after lunch. I know this is the time period where we want to have a little coffee, a little bit of chocolate, so it'll be good to have this conversation. Thanks to Monisha for organizing this and bringing us all together. This issue has actually been, for me, a difficult one thinking through in my work for a variety of reasons. I'll tell you guys a little bit about that. And so it's good to, for me, an opportunity to bring together some of the issues that I'm actually working on right now with one of the book chapters. So it'll be great to have some of the Q&A and discussion. As Monisha said, my working title for the book manuscript is Fabled Futures and Gridiron Dreams. And so I just wanted to tell you a little bit about why that's the working title, to give you a sense of the scope of the kinds of things that I'm working on. And as we continue, I'll tell you guys a little bit more about the backgrounds we've been into my comments. Fabled Futures refers to both the idea of this mobility that's connected to the United States, right, to the shores of America, to moving abroad, to the possibilities of families in American Samoa where I grew up, raising their collective fortunes, right, in part through the movement of sons, daughters, uncles, aunties, mother, father, brother, sister, as part of a sensibility about family, about community. And so I am thinking through this idea of fabled features not only as something to think about someone mobility abroad, but also to think specifically about the industry of football in the United States, right? And the kind of stakes that are attached to the possibilities of success. We think about minimum rookie salaries, so we think about multi-million-dollar contracts, et cetera, et cetera. What is at stake when our young brothers, cousins are thinking about this fabled future, right, in terms of possibility of sport? So the project that I'm working on right now is really animated by the question of social transformation on the island of Tutuila in the late 20th century. So how has this relationship with the United States, the question about U.S. empire, about territorial status, provided the conditions of possibility for movement in particular ways, for settlement of Samoan communities, through military routes, now through sport, labor, etc. And then the second part of the title, Gridiron Dreams, right? So thinking specifically about what's happening with the sports industry and how and why the sport of American football in particular has become indigenized in Samoan communities, and so what that looks like and what are the potential effects, right, of that kind of thing. And I say this as someone who is part of a football family, not just as sort of fans and people who follow the game, but as folks like my dad, my brothers, cousins, uncles, whose own fortunes have been tied to possibilities of movement through American football, right? Geographic, social, economic, mobility are the things that we're thinking about and talking about here. And then the question of feminist scholarship, I just wanted to say at the beginning, I think oftentimes there is this assumption about feminist theory or sort of feminist analyses as something that's outside of our communities, that comes from the West. And there is basis for some of that kind of thinking about feminist scholarship. But I actually became a feminist growing up in our family, in our village, in Tutuila. Before I read any feminist scholars, before I went to university, having my own critique about particular kinds of gender inequalities that I saw as a young girl in our community and in our family. And yes, we had, so anyway, we can get back to that, to the Q&A. But in terms of the contradiction, I think my work is inspired in a lot of ways, probably in most ways, by contradiction. So how do we think about gender inequality in our communities, and also think about the cultural traditions that we want to uphold, right? How do we think about this mobility, and also account for a lot of the drawbacks that it has presented for a lot of our communities? How do we think about the sport of football and also consider the issue of risk and injury, right, for our next generation? So just to give you a little bit of the background on the kinds of questions that I'm sorting through in this current project.